Craighead Caverns and the Lost Sea Adventure. Part of the fun of doing my own webcast is that sometimes I get to do something different. Recently, I was on vacation with the kids and grandkids in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. It's kind of like the Las Vegas Strip for kids and their parents. This is in the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains. One day, we took a 90-minute drive west to Sweetwater, Tennessee. Arriving at what seemed to be a classic tourist attraction for kids, the Lost Sea Adventure, I was pleasantly surprised, being a history buff. The tourist attraction is built around historic and natural wonder, the Craighead Caverns. Prior to the 1800s, the Cherokee Indians used the caverns as their special meeting place for their tribal councils. In fact, the name comes from the original owner, Chief Craighead. Many Indian artifacts, including pottery, weapons, and jewelry, have been found deep inside the caverns in a space now known as the Council Room. Some are on display in the entry to the attraction. There is a gap in the history from when it was Cherokee and then it was not. I can understand why the locals did not want to focus on that. The Cherokees were forced to leave their homeland by the U.S. government in the early 1800s. In fact, this led to the famed Trail of Tears, according to reports. In any event, for visitors, advance tickets are available and the costs are reasonable. There is ample free parking. Our initial reservation was for 10:30, and when we realized it was going to be longer than expected ride from Pigeon Forge, we called them. The Lost Sea folks are very cooperative in moving our tickets to a later time. Upon arriving, we were placed with a group and met our guide, Skylar. He was a pleasant man with a good sense of humor and presented the history of the caverns as we walked along. The tour is not for everyone. It's reasonably accessible, but covers a fair amount of ground over about 90 minutes. There are some slippery spaces and some declines and inclines. I recommend bringing a sweater and closed-toe shoes with good tread. Just fair warning, the restrooms are only in the ticketing area, none in the caverns. As our guide explained, the arriving European settlers found the caverns, which are a constant 58 degrees, perfect for storing produce and other items. During the Civil War, the Confederacy mined for saltpeter, a key component in making gunpowder. A large wooden vessel was on display in the caverns where bat dung, I thought it was going to be some type of mineral, but it's bat dung, was put in a wooden vessel and then very hot water was poured over it. The liquid was drained from the bottom and then collected. Then the key ingredients were extracted from the liquid. That operation went on from about 1860 to 1863 until the Union forces entered that area. I'm not really sure of the involved chemical process, but I don't need to know more. Nearby, there is graffiti in the cave from 1863. It has been carbon tested and authenticated as being 160 years old. Another interesting aspect was in the early 20th century during Prohibition, moonshiners operated 3 stills and dance halls. One of the stills is still on display inside the caverns. But why is the attraction called the Lost Sea Adventure? Of course, there's a story to that. Our guide Skylar explained that the underground cavern lake was discovered in 1905 by a 13-year-old local, Ben Sands. He played in the caverns often and squeezed his small frame through an opening. He was in a room so large he couldn't see its walls with his lantern. He threw mud balls in all directions and heard splashes in all directions. Ben tried to tell his dad about the hidden lake, but when he brought his father into that part of the caverns, the water table had risen and closed the access that he had used. Another interesting discovery was in 1939 when explorers found the fossilized remains of a Pleistocene jaguar and an elk fawn, which led to an excavation by paleontologists from the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. Sadly, those bones were taken to that museum. In return, there are plaster models of some of the remains and a footprint of the jaguar in the entry area of the attraction. The theory is that the jaguar, 20,000 years ago, somehow got into the caverns, lost its way, never found its way out again. In the mid-1960s, an effort was made to investigate the caverns as a bigger tourist attraction. The water table at that time was lower, and they discovered the massive underground lake. In a cool note, Ben Sands was still alive, and they connected with him. There's a portrait of him in his 70s by the entrance. Up to this time, entering the caverns was an effort. There were steps constructed into the caves from the natural entrance. However, for a modern tourist attraction, a different approach was needed. Today, at the current entrance, there is a large yellow tunnel that is about 35 feet long. The guide meets you there and does his introduction before entering the actual caverns. The sites above are described by the guide while also pointing out normal cave formations. An unusual formation are anthridites, also known as cave flowers. They grow very slowly and are on the ceiling of the caverns. The tour takes the visitors into various parts of these large caverns, with the featured part, the underground lake, near the end of the tour. Flat bottom boats, which hold about 20, quietly give the tour groups a chance to see the lake in more detail. The lake is reportedly the largest underground lake in North America. An odd feature is rainbow trout that have been added to the lake. As the boats approach, the fish swarm around the boats to get fed. The trout live for 5 or 6 years, and then another batch is added to the water for another term. The boat ride is fairly short, perhaps 10 minutes. We then bid our guide goodbye with our thanks. Like most tourist attractions these days, the exit is through the gift shop. I had hoped for some local items, but much of what I saw was made in China. On the way to the parking lot, we stopped in a little village nearby. A sweet shop and a glass blowing studio were located there. There were some very interesting locally made glass items. So, over 250 years of history and a tour of a natural wonder, all in 90 minutes. This is Dr. David D. Shine. Thanks for joining me for this special edition of Saving America. Remember, a new Saving America show is aired on the Brushwood Media Network every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Listen on any of the 16 network stations, Apple or Google mobile app, Apple CarPlay, TuneIn, Smart Speaker, and all smart TVs. Find more information at the brushwoodmedianetwork.com. Please be sure to join us each week. We welcome and love your feedback from our growing audience.